Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Microsoft Teams Backup, 8 Facts You Need to Know. This special webinar event is brought to you in partnership with Veeam and produced by Actual Tech Media. Thank you so much for joining us on this webinar. We've got a great event lined up for you. We've got a lot of demo, a lot of real world examples to share with you. So you're in for a treat today. We want this to be an educational event, and I encourage you to use the questions box there in your audience console. We will be doing a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll be serving as the moderator. I also want to call your attention there to the Handouts tab. In your audience console, you'll find a link to the Veeam Office 365 backup, as well as the Conversational Geek Guide to Protecting Office 365. So make sure that you download those resources. And finally, at the end of the webinar, we'll be announcing the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card. You must be live in attendance to qualify. A prize terms and conditions can be found there in the Handouts tab. And then new for this year, we've been doing a best question prize as well for a $50 Amazon gift card. We at Actual Tech Media are all former IT professionals ourselves, and we know how tough it can be out there in the world of enterprise IT to get your questions answered, to get expert advice. And so we're here to help, and we encourage you to do that through the questions box. And also maybe a little bit of encouragement will be this Amazon $50 gift card prize. We'll contact the prize winner after the webinar today. And with that, I'm excited to introduce you to today's expert presenters. Welcome Edward Watson, Senior Global Product Marketing Manager at Veeam, and Corinne Bissett, Technologist for Product Strategy, also at Veeam. Edward and Corinne, it's great to have you. I'll first hand it off to you, Edward. Take it away.
Great. Well, thank you, David. And yeah, we're really excited to be here to dive into a topic that will hopefully be very educational. Like David said, we want to keep this educational. We want to keep those questions coming in throughout. So if something comes in mind, feel free to send our way. So my name's Ed Watson, like David said, Global Product Marketing Manager at Veeam, and I'm joined by Corinne. Say hello, Corinne.
Hi, I'm a technologist on the product strategy side here at Veeam.
Awesome. So today we want to give you 8 facts that you absolutely need to know. And again, we will keep this very educational, really give you the why, what, and how. We want to give you the why would you want to back up Teams as part of O365, exactly what Teams is, right? How it works on the back end. And then we're going to give you the how to back it up with a great demo that Corinne's going to give us today. So, and of course, we'll wrap up with Q&A. So first, we can't talk about Teams without just the sheer growth that Teams has had. And really, that's fact number one, is Teams is, in fact, Microsoft's fastest growing business app ever of all time, right? So it's now used by 91% of the Fortune 100. It's seen great amount of growth, 50% growth, really in the past 6 months. So really, with this growth and with this sheer, just large amount of adoption, what we're seeing is that many organizations have rushed to deploy Teams, right? And have maybe not fully understood exactly, how Teams works on the back end, maybe some of those security risks and other various vulnerabilities that Teams is subject to. So hopefully today, if you have deployed this fairly recently, or maybe even rushed to deploy Teams, hopefully we can give you a lot more information about what Teams is and how it works on the back end so that you can appropriately formulate that protection strategy. Fact number 2, there are in fact 7 reasons that we've identified that you need to back up Teams as part of O365. And these aren't actually reasons that we've come up with. These are reasons from market research. So all of these reasons have come up in various surveys. Top of the list actually is accidental deletion, which actually makes sense if you think about human error and how that can sometimes lead to data loss. Again, a deletion doesn't matter so much. It's what happens post-deletion, right? Whether you still have that data or not. Microsoft does actually have some various retention policies in place, right? Teams has its own basic retention policies, but unfortunately, it doesn't replace the need for a backup. So retention policies change; they're very complex to monitor and manage, and you might think that you're holding on to a data for a certain amount of time when in fact you might not actually be. In fact, some departments have their own expectations of what retentions might be or what they shouldn't be. And again, keeping on top of all of that is just much easier if you have that backup. Regardless of what that retention is, you're not going to lose the data you think is retained. Internal security threats, of course, rogue employees can always happen, right? External security threats. We do know that things like ransomware, phishing, these things are becoming much more sophisticated, right? These guys are definitely finding new ways to reach our employees. So we need to make sure that a backup is in place as that very, very last resort. If something happens where we get a breach and we're not able to mitigate that, any of the using any of the built-in security measures, we need to make sure that at the very least we have that backup as that very last resort to back up and get that data back during an attack. Legal and compliance is still a very huge use case for organizations. Office 365, Teams does have the ability to perform some basic e-discovery, search and find capabilities, but again, it will not be all-encompassing. It won't be the type of e-discovery that you need to quickly and appropriately search across your entire organization, really get that granular search and recovery method that something like Veeam can offer. And of course, there's that added complexity that most of us have with managing hybrid environments, of course, streamlining protection across those hybrid environments, and lastly, the team's data structure, which we're really going to focus on today as kind of the star reason of today. And that's all around really understanding the team's data structure and why it's so critical to understand that in order to appropriately back up that data. Fact number 3, 67% of businesses are still unprotected. We do see that many organizations now are backing up. I think anywhere between 10 and 20% growth in terms of backup year over year. But still, we do see that the majority of businesses are left unprotected. So even though we do see that people are moving towards backup, we still see that there are 67% that still are not protected. But again, we're seeing the right trend. We're seeing more and more organizations year over year. We're seeing that year over year growth of adoption, which is great to see. It's great to see that more companies are taking backup seriously for O365. So now I'm going to leave it to Corinne here to go through why Microsoft say that it's your responsibility using the O365 shared responsibility model.
Thank you. And for those of you that don't know what the shared responsibility model is, it's a model developed by Microsoft which gives you a graphical representation of what you're responsible for as the customer and what Microsoft is responsible for the provider in any of their cloud relationships. Anything from software to as a service to infrastructure as a service, this model gives you that representation. What we're going to look at more closely here is going to be the software as a service side, and it starts with the primary responsibilities. What Microsoft is responsible for is the data and the replication of that data, as well as, say, the recycling bin for like a short-term data retention for data loss or any type of quick recovery in that sense. And you're responsible for the backup and the copies of your data to different locations, as well as different revisions of that data going back. The full data retention is within entirely the customer's hand for any type of restore responsibilities as well. They also break down the security scope where they're responsible for, say, the physical security, the logical security, and of course, the application security. But as the organization, you are responsible for any time an account is used to alter any of the data on the infrastructure. That means if there is a rogue administrator or a compromised account and you have something that results in an accidental deletion or any of the other 7 reasons to back up the data originally, then they are not responsible. They, being Microsoft, is not responsible for restoring any of that data for you. And of course, we come down to regularly compliance within organizations. Any type of legal or in place hold from Microsoft is specifically for any type of court proceeding. It does not mean that this legal hold will meet your compliance and regulation needs. It means that if you need to provide an e-discovery for a court case, they can provide that bundle back based on the scope that you've specified. This does not restore back to your original environment either. It would be a manual download and re-upload process. And that brings us to the industry analyst view on the backup process. I think you had this one, Edward.
Yeah, so fact number 5, so we've covered that Microsoft have said this themselves, that you should have a backup of Microsoft Office 365. Research firms also, basically the industry research firms such as IDC, 451, they all have their opinions on this, and widely there is a consensus that from IDC's standpoint, without data protection extended to O365, enterprises are exposing themselves to those compliance issues, those data loss issues, some security vulnerabilities, as well as business continuity risks. And of course, these other quotes as well. So you can see that, again, that there is that consensus in the market that Office 365 backup is definitely needed or recommended by these analyst firms. Next, we're going to dive into how exactly Teams works. And this is kind of what we were talking earlier in terms of the data structure and what exactly Teams is and what it consists of. And that brings us to fact 6, number 6. So that is that Teams is not a self-contained application. And what I mean by that is that Teams acts as an abstraction layer that brings together data from many Microsoft applications, so including Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business. And if you think about it, things like Teams conversations are located in an Exchange group mailbox. Files shared in a chat, those are within OneDrive. Or think about file tabs in Teams, or the wiki, or OneNote. Those are all SharePoint items. So again, it's almost like there's a back-end universe that Teams essentially brings together under that one umbrella. And once you understand that, and hopefully this is making sense to everyone, then you can really understand exactly how you should be protecting Teams data. But Corinne has a lot more to share on the team structure itself. Take it away, Corinne.
So, thank you. There are 2 ways that the industry is backing up Teams data, and understanding that first part that you went through, Edward, that it's not a self-contained application, helps bring to light how we were originally protecting any type of data entities prior to the the data API for Teams. And that's, we were able to get the Exchange mailboxes. We were able to get the SharePoint Online data, as well as the OneDrive for Business. And this allowed us to at least export something that would help you meet compliance. But here in recent versions, we have fact number 8. The Microsoft Teams API was released, which gave us access to that metadata and configuration settings for those channels on the back end, as well as tabs, members, and the structure itself. This allowed us and enabled us to be able to do granular restores of items, as well as the chats and the files within those chats back to the original Teams itself. This allowed for a higher efficiency, meaning you don't have to export that data, re-upload that data, or save it to another place. You can give it back to the end users in the place they expect to see that data. And that's what we've developed and put into version 5.
Yeah, absolutely. So now that we've gone through the 8 facts on Office 365 and Teams, now we really want to dive into exactly how to back up Teams data, and that's where we're very excited to share what we now are regarded as the number 1 in terms of Office 365 backup in terms of market share, and I would say popularity, hopefully. But on the next slide here, we kind of go into more about our team support. So in terms of version 5, like Corinne alluded to, we've really delivered this purpose-built backup and recovery for Teams. And we've done that by leveraging the Microsoft APIs to really give much more control for the user to leverage purpose-built Teams backup, give much more control over how and what they back up, recovery options, many different granular recovery options to really help get the data back in the form that the customer needs, that you might need. And of course, e-discovery is a very big use case. And really, with this version 5 update, we've really allowed you to tap into those really granular search capabilities and really search completely across all Teams components. So Corinne's going to go a layer deeper into each of these capabilities on the next few slides.
Thank you. Now, with the purpose-built team application, we're able to again tap into that Microsoft APIs, which means we have access to all of that metadata. So we're not just restoring back the raw data formats, we're restoring back the raw data formats with the specific settings for access, say, of users, Teams objects, including the channels, settings, and applications, as well as tabs. And this allows you to get back the data where you need that data and where it makes sense. The backup of Teams is a lot more flexible with the ability to back up to, say, Azure Blob, S3 storage, and IBM Cloud, and just about anything that's S3 compatible at this point. And we have a wide range of service providers that can do this for you as well. With Teams data, we know that it's user-driven, it's file-driven, which means it gives a little bit more volatility to the size and expecting of that data that's coming through your infrastructure. And of course, with every version, we strive to make it faster. With the integrated API, it's an automated process. In a couple of clicks, you're restoring back your data to your original infrastructure with a very granular type of data, as well as sending out as an email. You can also save and export if you do need to do something such as an e-discovery process. You're able to pull a bundle of whatever data that you need in order to meet that requirements. And we have over 40 different ways to be able to restore it. And we'll take a look at a chart a little further down the line here with all of those different ways to restore, as well as go through a couple in the demo. And of course, with any type of restore process, you want to have e-discovery. The e-discovery has hundreds of different search fields and criteria that you can put in for each of the applications in order to get the scope and conditions necessary to do the restore for your compliance needs. It's also very fast. We'll demo this live so you can see just how fast it can search my entire infrastructure worth of Teams to get back a single file. And scalability. In version 5, we've increased to 5 times the scalability to handle larger enterprises from the same console. And as before, we're able to import not only just the cloud infrastructures, but hybrid infrastructures are supported from the same console, so you don't have to chase down where your data is at. We also have twice the speed of data movement between the on-premises Jet database and the object storage. If you do decide to migrate to object storage, this could be a fast, easy, and efficient way to get your data into a scalable OpEx type of infrastructure. And of course, parallel processing of SharePoint sites allows us to process those lists faster, tapping into the PowerShell and RESTful API calls so that everything is processed in moments. You're not waiting for your list to run one by one through an interface. And coming to the infrastructure itself, we support, again, from the same console, an on-premises environment of Exchange and SharePoint, as well as Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, and Microsoft Teams. You're able to move your data to any type of repository that makes sense, whether it's an on-premises type of deployment, or if you want to use an object storage of any of the ones that we've listed before that you can see here. But it doesn't really just stop there. We don't lock you into the storage that you're using. You're able to migrate your data whenever it makes sense to the business. So if you start off with a local storage type, and like to migrate to an object storage, you are in complete control of your data in your infrastructure. And of course, with a new data type and a new application backing up from Microsoft, we have a whole new Explorer, which is the Veeam Explorer for Microsoft Teams, which has all of the great features of our previous Explorers, which is restoring back to either the original location, modified locations, sending an email out. Now, this is one of my favorite features when it comes to a help desk ticket conversation, because instead of restoring back to the original location and wondering if you're going to need to overwrite a file, put it next to the file, or we run into those situations where the end user may have misplaced where they put the file all together and they just need you to get it back to them. You can send it directly from an email from the console without having to export and re-import that data. You can also save or export that data locally. And of course, we have many different services with our service providers that provide all kinds of portal level restores. And onto the 40 different ways to restore. If you take a closer look at this chart, you can see that we're not restoring that data or exporting that data in a format or in a raw format. We're exporting it in a way and in a format that makes sense to each of the applications that we integrate with. A great example is here in the Exchange column, where you have the MSG file and PST files, which is exactly the file type that you would find anytime you're working with Microsoft Exchange. And when you get over to SharePoint, you're working with documents, libraries, and lists. Now, before too much more, we'll go ahead and take a look at the interface. Do we have any questions while we're getting that up?
Lots of great questions coming in from the audience. Thank you so much, everyone out there. I've been queuing these up for our Q&A session. Honestly, I wouldn't know where to start. There's so many questions, Corinne.
Okay. Are we able to see the screen? We'll go ahead and dive into that.
Yeah, it looks good.
Great. So getting started with the console is as easy as adding in your organization and selecting whether you're running a hybrid, an on-prem, or say a cloud-only environment, and all of the applications that are associated that you'd like to back up. Once you've added in your organization with the proper authentication, you have options for the type of repositories you'd like to send to as well. Anything from, say, a local storage type to even these object storage types where it'll allow you to have a local cache, but the bulk of your data is offloaded to, say, Blob or an S3 with Amazon. And you can even encrypt that data, giving you security even if there was a compromised credential that allowed data to leak out of a bucket. So let's come back to the organization. Creating a job is just as easy. Getting in is just creating a name for that job and selecting the restore scope you'd like to have within this particular job. And you're not limited to singly adding in each of the components. You can decide, I want to back up an entire group. So if you have already in your organization a finance group, an HR group, and say a help desk group, you can spread those off into separate repositories in order to provide a proper billing to an object storage to each of these departments to spread across that load. And of course, new is Teams with version 5. You can choose to back up your entire organization and edit out which components as a catch-all job as well. Coming into the scheduling options, you can run your job as often as makes sense to your business. It's not limited to 2 or 3 times a day. You can run a periodic backup less than the time it takes to run the job, and this will create a continuous running job for you. Coming into the Explorers, I want to go ahead and delete some data over here so we can see that restored back to the original location. And this is just the Teams application. I'm going to come over to Files and remove the OSI. And we'll delete that from here. We'll make sure that file deletes and it's gone. So before we hop directly into Teams, just to get a feel of how easy and simple these Explorers look side by side, this is our Exchange where you're able to see your mailboxes and all of your users and your data, as well as a quick advanced find button for searching all of these mailboxes, and a conversational history, which tails all of the private chats that this user has done within the organization. As we come to SharePoint, it looks very similar, but of course we're working with those SharePoint sites, your documents, your libraries, and your content underneath each of those sites. OneDrive looks a lot like a file explorer, where you're able to view all of the folders underneath of that application, as well as the text or other types of documents. And again, the advanced find. We're actually going to use the advanced find here in our Teams application. We can see the entire scope of the teams in our organization. We'll use an advanced find. And we're looking for something that's a file, coming down to say we kind of know the name of that file, and we're just going to use a contains OSI. You'll add that into the restore scope, and you'll see that up here at the top. It'll search all of the teams in your organization that you have within this backup scope and quickly go through and find this one file that contains the word OSI. And if you want, you can immediately restore from right here and to the original location, save, or even send it as an attachment on an email out. Or if you'd like, you can see the original location to see where that's going to be restored back to. So taking a look at the original location, we have all of those same restore types as well as a version history. So if there are multiple versions of this file and you need a version that's a couple versions back, right from here, you can restore that previous version. We're going to go ahead and restore that file back to the original location. It will ask you to authenticate with an account that has permissions to restore back, in this case, to Teams. And if you are selecting lots of items, you can do just changed items or missing items from that list if you want to bypass some of the things that still exist in your infrastructure. Over here to the right is a great feature if you're trying to restore a document that, say, has hundreds of versions and the end user only needs the latest version. This checkbox right here will restore the latest version without needing to restore all of that extra data into your infrastructure, saving time on the entire restore process. Now, this is going to restore directly from the backup into my infrastructure, and then it'll give me a summary report of the restore process, as well as all of the files that were processed in this scope. If we just click see more, we have the file, which is the OSI file. It says that its status was successful. We'll hit OK here, come back to our Teams and do a quick refresh. And we can see the OSI file is there and loaded up in the console. I do also want to point out that you can see the modified date for this file is the original modified date because we are restoring back the same metadata that was originally within the team scope. And that's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Corinne. Great demo. Awesome demo. And, you know, we can't live without those cat pictures. So clearly Corinne and I love Veeam Backup for Office 365. We're slightly biased, but do not take our word for it. Okay, folks? So please see what our customers say. We have TrustRadius, G2 platforms where we have Veeam Backup for Office 365 listed. And these are completely raw and unfiltered reviews of this product. So again, don't take our word for it. This is a quote I love. Get Veeam Backup for Office 365. Your boss will love you. So hopefully those on the line today choose VBO so that your boss can love you too if they don't already. But in any case, please view these G2 and TrustRadius platforms where Veeam Backup for Office 365 is listed to see what our customers are saying about this. And with that, we have a few actions we'd like you to take before we wrap up for questions. So we do have this resource that goes really much deeper into Teams than what we were able to cover today in this half an hour here. So please download this. We would appreciate it if you take this one step further and educate yourself much deeper on this subject. So Brian Posey, MVP, wrote this, and again, I think this is just a great icing on the cake for today's presentation. If you're interested in diving more into this, and of course, see for yourself. Take the free trial. You get completely full capabilities, free for 30 days. So we highly urge that if you are interested. There's the link below. So definitely take that free trial. And I think with that, we are ready for some questions, David.
Excellent. Yeah, great presentation. Love the live demo, Corinne, as well. Thank you so much. We have a lot of questions for you. So let's see. If you're ready for some questions, let's kick it off. Here's a question from Manoj, who's asking, once the data is backed up, how is it protected after that?
So I think they're maybe asking about if anyone else can access that data. Only anyone that has access to the console can actually access the data. If you do the backup to object storage, you can even add an encryption layer so no one else can access that data.
Excellent. Okay. And then let's see. Here's another question about storing the data once you back it up, getting it off site. What kind of options are available for that?
There's nothing natively within our console, but we have many service providers that offer a secondary backup configuration, which will handle all of that process for you.
Nice. And then what about backing up the entire organization? There's a question here about that. Can I simply say I want to back up everything in Teams, or how does that work?
Yeah, and we covered it a little in the demonstration. I was able to select the entire organization and then scope down to if I want to back it all up or if I just want to back up a particular application within that organization all at once.
Okay, nice. And then once it's backed up, is there a retention policy you can define on how long you're going to keep that data?
Yes, you have a flexible retention policy from anywhere from days to forever, depending on what your organization needs.
Very nice. Very nice. There's a lot of there's over 70, 80 questions in here now, Corinne. So if you see any that call out to you, feel free to answer those. One of the questions I saw here is, once the data is backed up, is it? Or you already answered that one. I'm sorry. And then the backups would be stored on site. There was a question about what Veeam region would they be stored in. They're actually stored wherever your Veeam data is stored. Is that right?
Yeah, and if you send it to object storage, it's sent to whatever region your object storage is within.
Nice. There's a question about whether or not this is available in the Azure Cloud Marketplace.
It is, as well as the AWS Cloud Marketplace. You can do an all-in-one deployment, which will already have Veeam backup for Microsoft Office 365 installed on top of a Windows platform.
Excellent. Yeah, that would make deployment very easy. What about automation to just make sure that this happens every night without fail? Would that just happen if you create a backup job?
We have automated emails that can be sent out from the console to give you success on your job runs. We also have a complete RESTful API suite that you can tap into to make it come into your personal ticket system if you choose.
Very nice. There's a question about universal licensing, Veeam universal licensing. How does that fit in with this?
Veeam Universal Licensing is actually for Veeam backup and replication and our IaaS products. This license is separate where it runs off of per user base license. And correct me if I'm wrong, Edward. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, you're absolutely right, Corinne. So yeah, this is a separately deployed product, completely separate licensing structure from the universal licensing. So starts at $1.50 per user per month, and we have some great discounts if you commit to the 3 to 5 year mark. So yeah, again, completely different and much more aligned with the way that Microsoft licenses Office 365 itself.
Good to know. Good to know. All right. Another question from Chris. He's asking, will Veeam Office 365 backup protect the data from applications that are added into Teams? How does that work?
So, if you have an application added into Teams, we are not always able to access that back end data to that application. So, we're not able to back that up, but we will back up references to data. So, if you restore an entire Teams and it had an application link to it, the application link should be reestablished.
Okay. And then there's another question about the files that are put into Teams. Would those be backed up with this tool as well?
Yeah, that's actually what we did. Our demo was a files from the Files tab.
Excellent. What about a question here related to, infected files? Is there any sort of data scanning or malicious malware kind of scanning in this, or how would that work?
Yeah, so this is
We don't
not like advanced threat protection Windows Defender. This is a lot. This is all about the backup. So you know, this doesn't necessarily scan or do any of that initial security threat detection, but this does again provide that more or less that resort of backing up, restoring from that backup if there is a threat that surpasses that security detection. Do you have anything to add to that, Corinne?
I think that pretty much covers it. It's not an
Yeah.
endpoint protection. We do not back up any file from Microsoft if it's flagged a file as infected. It automatically will not let us download it to begin with. So that's something to also keep in mind. There is a inherent protection through the service, application service.
Excellent. Tony's asking if this would work in a multi-tenant environment for Microsoft 365.
So if you have multiple tenants, you should be able to add in the organization into the Teams application. Multi-geo SharePoint is not supported.
Got it. What about system requirements to actually run this?
So the system's requirements are going to vary based on how big and how much data that you're going to back up. We have a sizing guide that I'm sure we can get linked in here for any questions on deployment to make sure it's properly sized for your organization, how many user objects you're backing up.
Okay. Question about the team site backup as it's related to SharePoint. If it can back up the site, then is SharePoint backup available or not?
So if there is a SharePoint, we back up from the SharePoint site the raw data that fits into the Teams application, and then the Teams metadata that points to each of those locations on SharePoint. So there's a lot of overlap in that question for that understanding.
Okay. Excellent. This one may be a little bit more around Veeam backup and availability, but they're asking, can Veeam act as a data archival solution for the company as well?
It can in certain scenarios. You have to keep in mind the scope that Veeam backup and replication can handle. If the disk has to be directly attached to the virtual machine, it can't be, say, an iSCSI on a virtual machine, and it can't be an object storage data type. So if your data types are all in line for a machine type that can be backed up by Veeam backup and replication, it can be used as archival.
Excellent. And we're talking here about Teams backup specifically, but this would include backup of everything in Office 365, like Excel documents, as long as they were stored in OneDrive. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. We covered system requirements. Any support for classification or tagging of data?
There is no classification or tagging of data within our software itself, but we do have all of those advanced search items to usually find anything that you need.
Nice. Adam's asking if Power Apps and flows can be protected.
Not at this time, but we do take all of that feedback for what is going to be our next feature we support.
Excellent. Matt is asking if I use the Azure appliance and back up to an Azure blob, does the data ever go across the internet?
No, and actually that's one of our compliance regulations for some governments is they have Office 365 data, it's not allowed to leave the cloud, and that is one way to do it is have a fully OpEx deployed infrastructure.
Nice. And then what about disaster recovery? What would be the options around that if you had a total loss of all your Office 365 data? You would simply restore it from the Veeam backup, I would think, or?
Yeah, we can restore not just individual files, but we can restore data from entire organizational sets, like all of your SharePoint sites at the same time, all of your OneDrives, and all of the applications concurrently. Now, it will be a lot of data flow, but it is a fast, easy process, and it'll be just like it was the day before.
Excellent. And then what if they want to push their Office 365 backup data to an offsite backup server? Is that where you said they would use partners? Or does it work just like Veeam backup and recovery?
You could send your backups to an offsite location using proxies, or you can go with a VCSP cloud provider through Veeam that would do that in an automation set for you and take care of all that process.
Nice. And then what about the frequency of the backup? Kenneth is asking, is it real time? Does it back up at certain intervals? Or how does that work? At what point would you be able to recover back to?
So your recovery point will be as fast as your backups could process. If you set a low backup time, it'll continuously run the job. As soon as one stops, it'll start up another cycle for you.
Okay. And this is kind of a technical question here, and we might need to get back to this, but Rommel's asking, when you use a Mimecast proof point for MX records pointing to their DNS servers, will this still function?
I assume that's for an on-premises type of deployment because within the Office 365 environment, we work off of the APIs on the back end. As long as we can get a connection to the Exchange server on-prem in order to back up the mail and email accounts, which would be just based off its DNS server, we should be able to back that up no problem.
Okay, excellent. So many good questions here. What type of access or account license would Veeam require on Office 365 in order to access the data? Like, would it need its own Office 365 license?
So we do only back up licensed accounts and shared accounts.
Okay.
So any license, as long as it has access to that application.
Got it. Why? Yeah, I'm sure you mentioned this at the start of the presentation, but maybe you can just review. Why is it so important to protect Office 365 data when, of course, Microsoft has these, heavily, highly available data centers? Why is it still so critical?
So it is really nice. Oh.
No, go ahead.
You want to take it, Edward?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, that's a great inquiry, but if you think about it, their data centers are migrated and replicated real time, meaning if you have a problem from one data center, it's going to immediately replicate to their other data centers, meaning you have your data availability, but it's still going to be corrupt. It's the recoverability of backtracking that data to previous versions is what the backup software is for.
Good point. Another question from Adam. Can you back up guest account activity in Teams?
As long as an account has a license, you should be able to back it up. Now, if it's another organization, there may be a problem accessing that organization's account. But as long as it's within your organization and you have access to that account, you should be able to back it up.
Okay. Next question about version history. I'm thinking this is Office 365, like file version history. If it's set to 30, for example, but Veeam has been backing up iterations over the file, for let's say 60 different versions. Would it be safe to assume you could still restore those 30 versions beyond the version history in Office 365?
Yes. In fact, one of our retention types is completely around the different versions of files, and you can say how long ago that was. So it's not on how many versions, but you would say anything from the past 4 years, keep. And as long as all of those versions were in the last 4 years, they would be within the backup.
Okay. I like this question. Why not use Microsoft Backup to back up Office 365?
So Microsoft's quote unquote backup is actually more of a litigation hold or a compliance hold. It's not a true backup. It goes back to that whole scenario where if it's replicating its data across its infrastructure, you're keeping your eggs in all in one basket.
Great point. Great point. I think we've answered most of the questions I see here. Edward or Corinne, are there any that have caught your eye you want to cover?
There was one in here. Is the backup compressed or is there compression within the backup? And there is no compression within the backup, but whenever we send to object storage, we use the object storage type where we're able to reference multiple files in multiple locations, which could consolidate some of that backup space needed.
I think I saw a question. I think I might have seen a question from a Veeam customer who asked about whether they had to upgrade to version 5 for the Teams backup support. And just to confirm, yes, to take advantage of the new Teams backup, please upgrade to version 5.
Excellent. Can you customize the data that's backed up or the type of data or anything like that?
You can customize which application is backed up by which user scope or shared scope.
Okay. Okay. Well, I've just brought up the free trial link. This is a free 30-day trial. And if you actually just mouse over the link, the URL that's on the slides window, everyone out there, and click on that, that will open up a new browser tab or window in your browser, and you can sign up for the 30-day trial. Corinne, do you want to just kind of talk about, they put in their information there, they get an access to the trial. What would happen after that? What are the steps?
So after you get the trial downloaded, you have an unlimited user scope for 30 days. You add in your organization. There are default repositories, but if you want to try out an object storage repository, you can add that directly into the console, and that's all you need to start making jobs.
Excellent. Yeah, sounds super easy to do. I'll just leave that link up there while we announce our final prize winner. I also want to call out the handouts tab there for everyone. The very first link is the conversational Microsoft Teams backup free ebook that you can download. The conversational geek books are fun and educational at the same time. So make sure that you check out that link and get that free ebook on conversational Microsoft Teams backup. The second link in the handouts tab is the Veeam Office 365 backup landing page, where you can get more information, more details on exactly how this solution works. So I'll leave the trial up, and the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card prize today is Francisco Salas from Texas. Congratulations to Francisco. We'll be reaching out to the best question prize winner as well after today's webinar. Corinne, really excellent demo. Thank you so much for being on. And Edward, great presentation. Thank you so much as well.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, David.
And thank you to everyone out there in the audience for all the excellent questions. We really do appreciate those. Hope that you learned a lot on today's event. I hope that you'll give this solution a try for yourself, Veeam Backup for Microsoft Office 365. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.